Hello and welcome to this week's episode. The title of today's episode is Are Pacifists Evil? I'm in some woodland near my home. It's peaceful here, isn't it? Didn't always used to be like this. And for most species, it still isn't. We can't see it, but as we are standing here, all sorts of life and death struggles are going on. Between species, there is the struggle between predator and prey. Within species, there is the conflict for mating rights, or the conflict for resources. As we speak, I suspect ant colonies are fighting pitched battles with each other for these scant resources. And for our hunter-gatherer ancestors, things were pretty bad. The French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau spoke of the noble savage. He said that the inherent purity of the human species was corrupted by civilization. I don't agree at all. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors had a pretty bad time of it. Their lives were generally nasty, brutish and short, and also terrifying. Evidence from paleontologists suggests that more than 15% of people in that period died very violent deaths. And in the agricultural period that followed, things were not much better. Things have only improved in recent centuries. In the 20th century, despite 2 world wars and countless other conflicts and other human-created disasters, the death toll to violence of any sort, war, genocide, persecution, domestic violence, you name it, was down to about 5%. And for the first 20 years of this century, violent deaths of all types have gone down to just 1%. We may not have noticed it, but the last 20 years, up until recently, were the most peaceful in human history. I'm afraid the invasion of Ukraine is likely to change all that unless the perpetrators go punished. If they are not punished, this will stimulate other invasions and we could be plunged back into a really horrible, brutal way of life. So what's this got to do with pacifism? Well, let's find out. So what is pacifism? According to the Cambridge Online Dictionary, pacifism is the belief that war is wrong, and therefore to fight a war is wrong. One could extend this, but it will do for now. Most religions and political ideologies make a big deal about saying how pacific they are. My impression is, though, that the more they talk about peace, the more bloody their hands tend to be, but that's another story. So pacifists make a big deal about war, even though, according to the United Nations, it represents only a small part of violence in general. And I don't believe that all pacifists are this fixated. As an older man I met in my first job said to me, there are many things that are worse than war. He should have known. He was the same age as my father, but he was unfortunate enough to grow up in the 1930s as a Polish Jew. He spent some time first in the Warsaw Ghetto and then was moved to concentration camps and death camps and so on. It was only because of his passion for radio and his ability to fix just about any radio set put in front of him that saved his life. He spent most of the war working on radios for the Wehrmacht. Unusually for a Polish Jew, he found his way to the death camp at Belsen and was liberated by the British Army. He was taken over to Britain, more dead than alive, and settled there. In due course, he became a British citizen and raised a family. He never got rid of the numbers tattooed on his arm. Once I got to know him better, I asked him why he hadn't got rid of the numbers, and he said, "I want to keep the anger alive." And I said, "Against the Germans?" He said, "The Germans were only the leaders of the Holocaust. Just about every other nationality in Europe collaborated quite enthusiastically. Almost all of the nationalities. They only changed their behaviour when it became clear that the Allies were going to win. No," he said, "my anger is against the Jews." I asked him why, obviously, and he said, "Evil doesn't occur just because people say yes to it. It occurs because the majority of people don't fight it." And he said, "It's like the school bully syndrome, but on a bigger and more brutal scale. If you allow violence to be committed, then you are encouraging it. He made the point that the Jews had suffered more than 1,000 years of persecution by Christians, then by Nazis, but also by fascists and communists. He said, if we fought back, our persecutors would probably have gone to find someone else to persecute. In any case, there was nothing to lose. He said, most racists are cowards. If you hit them back, they will run away. His point of view has been borne out throughout history and in countless school playgrounds. If this is true, why was pacifism so widespread in the 1930s, and why is it so strong now? It's so obvious that brutal dictators are helped and indeed encouraged by pacifism. They see it as a weakness to be exploited. Pacifists often point to Gandhi's passive resistance to British rule in India in the 1930s, but they ignore the historical background and the fact that the British Raj, for all its defects, kind of played by the rules. When, on several occasions, Gandhi was asked if his passive resistance would work against Hitler or Stalin, he gave very evasive answers. Even in India, it was economics, as usual, that led to the independence more than passive resistance. So why is pacifism so popular in Western Europe, despite the lessons of the 1930s? One can understand German pacifism more than others. All the blame for the horrors of the Second World War were placed on their shoulders, very conveniently letting a host of other nations and institutions off the hook. But why the others? I have a theory that might explain this, at least in part. In 1944, a plan for the post-World War American-led order was established. It was called the Bretton Woods Agreement. It was ratified by most of the 44 Allied countries, with the exception of the Soviet Union. The results of this new world order is still around for us today. Organisations like the IMF being one of the most visible examples. Effectively, it's a deal. The US would guarantee the financial and military security of the countries who signed up to the deal in exchange for loyalty. For example, Western European countries didn't need to spend enormous amounts of money on warships to escort their imports and exports of just about everything, including oil. For 70 years, most countries have enjoyed security without understanding the price because they don't pay it. It's easy to be a pacifist when you are safe. Western European nations in particular slashed their defence budgets to record lows. Most of them did not even respect the very low defence spending demands by NATO, and even to this day they don't. After generations of life in a gilded cage, many people are living in a fool's paradise. All this is likely to change. Since the shale oil revolution and various other changes, the USA doesn't really need us anymore. But coming back to the question, are pacifists evil? I would say no. I have met many pacifists who are good, well-meaning people, but I would say that they do evil by omission, by hiding from reality, by callously, in my view, accepting the suffering of others. This is why I intensely dislike these flags. They so easily lead to the same result. A lot of pacifists would say that anyone prepared to use violence is a violent person, as if the world only has two options to everything. I hate violence and consider it an unpleasant necessity, as do most species in the natural world. For decades, the world order was stable and improving for most people, but we are now moving into a much more dangerous age. Widespread pacifism could become a great threat to world peace. Well, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you're enjoying the series, please click the like and subscribe buttons. And why not share it with your friends? Bye for now.